A lot of couples struggle to communicate in their relationships. They usually don't have a problem talking and understanding. What they have a problem with is they're using tactics that they think are helping them communicate, which are actually hurting their communication, and they end up killing their relationship instead of helping them get what they want out of the relationship. So in this video, I want to give you 3 phrases that may be killing your relationship without you even knowing it. Before I jump in, if you've not already downloaded our free guide to intimacy, you'll see a link in the description area below. Grab that. It'll give you some ideas on how to connect with your spouse in 4 areas of intimacy and give you some tools to walk that out practically. So 3 phrases that will kill your marriage if you're unaware. Phrase number 1 is, how would you feel if I fill in the blank? And what this is this is your attempt to get your spouse to feel what you're feeling. You're trying to get them to be in your shoes. The problem is you can't force somebody else to empathize with you. You can't force somebody to put themselves in your shoes. So it's a veiled attempt to do that, but it's never going to work. Another problem with it is they may not be as impacted by a certain situation as you're impacted by that certain situation, because we're all wired different, right? If you have an insecure spouse trying to convince a secure spouse of an issue they're having by saying, how would you feel if I had lunch with a coworker of the opposite sex? Because you're insecure about that, maybe for good reason, you got some past relationship wounds, but if your spouse does not have the same issues, their response may be, I don't care, that's fine. It's not a big deal. You were both having lunch, they happen to be there, you happen to be there, you're not talking about anything appropriate, there's not an attraction there, there's no impact or threat to our relationship, it's not a big deal. Or maybe you got a spouse who's more conscious about their body and says, well, how would you feel if, I touched your stomach, or if I walked by and pinched your love handles? And they're like, I don't care, pinch away. So part of the problem is if we try to get them to feel what we're feeling, but the same situation doesn't impact them in the same way, the conversation's over. You have just eliminated any conversation or any attempts by them to try to understand what you're feeling, because they don't feel it the same way you feel it. So that is going to continue to cause problems in a relationship because they don't get it. Like, I love to joke around. I love making fun of people, and I like people making fun of me. So if my spouse said, well, how would you feel if I made a joke on you in front of people? I'd be like, awesome. I love it. But that's irrelevant if it negatively impacts her. So what you need to be saying in a relationship, instead of how would you feel if, what you need to do is just say, when you did this, when you said this, it made me feel this way. It embarrassed me. It hurt me. It made me feel stupid. I don't like that when you do that kind of thing. You express that to them in hopes that if you're in a healthy relationship, that other person wants to hear you and make the adjustment, whether the same thing would impact them or not. So quit using the phrase, how would you feel if, all it's doing is killing your relationship. Phrase number 2 that may be killing your relationship is, you do it too. So, this is the ultimate deflection. Your spouse brings something to you, it's a legitimate concern they bring to you, and your response is, you do the same thing. Now, I get it. That may be true. But if you've watched any of my videos, you've seen I talk a lot about validation. I think truth comes second. I think validation needs to come first. You can watch a video at the end of this video. I'll link that as well. But the problem with you saying you do it too is you got to ask yourself, so can my spouse only bring something, a concern to me or an issue, if they've never ever done it in their own lives? And think about, the longer you're married, the more of a problem this is going to be. After 29 years of marriage, I don't think there's anything I would ever be able to bring up to my wife that I haven't at some point done too. So when you turn around and tell the other person you do it too, all you're doing is not taking responsibility. And so that would be my question for you. If you say you do it too, is it because you just don't want to take accountability or responsibility, so it's easy just to put it back on them? Or do you think they are not allowed, or they are disqualified for bringing something to you because they have done it as well? Now, I know what you're saying. Well, if I don't say something right now, then they're going to think they don't do it. And they're going to keep doing it to me too. Listen, I'm not saying you don't ever bring it up. Bring it up another time. I'm just saying when they bring it to you is not the moment to say you do it too. See, what a lot of people do is they don't say anything. Now, I don't know if you don't say anything because you're non-confrontational. I don't know if you don't say anything because it's not a big deal. But if you choose not to address something that's bugging you, that's on you. But what you don't get to do is ignore it, overlook it, not say anything, and then the moment your spouse brings something to you, you go, oh, I wasn't going to mention it, but now that you mention it, here's what you do. You don't get to do that in that moment. You gave up that right when you decide not to bring it up. So bring it up a different time, bring it up earlier, bring it up when it's bugging you, but do not turn around and tell them they do it too in the very moment that they're bringing an issue to you, because all you're ultimately doing is teaching and training your spouse to realize, don't ever bring anything to me, because when you do, I'm just going to deflect and turn around and blame you as well. And at some point, you'll be in a relationship where the other person never brings anything to you. And you may be thinking, oh, the relationship's going great. They haven't brought up any issues. No, all they're doing is building resentment because you've created an environment where they cannot bring anything to you and feel like you actually hear them, are listening to them, understand them, and want to make an adjustment in their direction. Phrase number 3 that may be killing your relationship is, you're just like your mama. No, I'm just kidding. Don't. That's not one of them. Don't do that, but that's not number 3. Actually, what I want to do is say phrase number 3 is, do not say this or it will kill your marriage. Phrase number 3 is this. It is, so-and-so's spouse does fill in the blank. Now, what you're really doing here is this becomes a manipulation technique now. What you're really trying to do is compare your spouse to somebody else's spouse in an area that's favorable to you, in an attempt that you're hoping that maybe when I pit them against this other person, kind of fictitiously, their competitive nature will rise up and they'll want to step up and do that thing so they don't look like a loser compared to this other person. There's a couple of problems with this. Problem number 1 is you may compare somebody else's spouse that your spouse thinks is a loser, right? So if you were like, hey, Amy's husband does fill in the blank, and your spouse is like, Amy's husband's an idiot. So how about this? Whatever he does, I don't do, because I don't ever want to be that dude. So you might have a problem because you bring up somebody that your spouse has zero desire to be like, and right there you just eliminated any hope that they would ever do the thing. I think another problem with saying this is you are cherry picking one aspect of that person that is favorable and enjoyable to you while ignoring all the other aspects of that person that may not be favorable, and saying, why don't you be like this aspect of them? Well, my question to you would be, if you get this good aspect, are you willing to take all the other stuff too? So we have, my wife and I, this has kind of been a running joke. We have a couple that are friends of ours, and they were at our house one time, and I was going to make his coffee in the morning, and he was like, well, I don't really know how I take it because my wife makes it. And so it turned into this joke that his wife always makes his coffee for him. So then fast forward a little while, we were talking about something, and he has bought his wife boughten's not even a word. He bought his wife a few nice purses. And so my wife's like, why don't you buy me purses like he does? And I said, well, why don't you make me coffee every morning like she does, right? So we got in this thing like, I'll do what he does if you do what she does. And we started to have this whole banter, and we were joking about it. But the reality is, you want that aspect of them, but do you want to have to do this aspect because they don't do that? You know, you may have somebody say, well, they always fly first class. Well, yeah, that's neat. And we don't fly first class. Well, how come? Well, that's because he travels 3 weeks out of the month, which is why he's got super duper executive platinum status. So would you like a once a year flying first class in exchange for me being gone 3 weeks out of the month? Probably not, but we like to cherry pick just the good parts. And so here's the reality. Even if you were to say in your head, no, I'll take all the other stuff with it, guess what? That's comparison. And comparison is a killer of relationships. At the end of the day, you didn't marry that person, you married this person. So instead of trying to pit them against each other in hopes that your spouse will rise up and do something, clearly communicate what it is you desire from your spouse, or what it is you would like your spouse to eliminate doing in a relationship, and why, because it's hurting you, because it embarrasses you, because it makes you feel insecure, whatever it is. Explain what it is and give your spouse a chance to understand it and make the adjustments. If they don't make the adjustments, then you'll have to make a decision on where you need to set boundaries so that you can remain healthy in the relationship, or maybe if it's severe enough, you may need to exit the relationship. But using the phrase so-and-so's spouse does fill in the blank is only going to set up some comparison, some competitive stuff. And listen, even if it works sometimes, it's not a long-term healthy strategy. If you can manipulate them into some activity in the short term, you can't carry that on in a healthy way in a long-term relationship. So avoid these 3 phrases at all costs because they're probably killing your relationship. How would you feel if I fill in the blank, you do it too, or so-and-so spouse does fill in the blank? Avoid these 3 marriage killers. Eliminate these phrases from your vocabulary. I promise you, your communication will go a lot better. Love to hear your thoughts on whether you do these and inadvertently didn't know you were actually hurting your relationship. Or give me a list of some other phrases that you see show up in your relationship that do not help you move the needle forward. And until next time, I'll see you right back here on RelationShots.